あの、学生時代は、
うん。
すごい練習ですか。
So,
で、どん
did
な練
you,
習をしたんですか？
when you were a student, did you practice a lot?
Yes.
What kind of practice? How did you practice? What kind of method book you use? How did you practice?
You know, I think this about a lot of 19, 20, 21-year-old people. It wasn't organized. Yeah, maybe it was. Maybe it was.
Okay.
I organized it. And, you know, I tell this story that, you know, of course, you know, because he wasn't playing anymore, you know, I had to do a lot of listening to recordings and stuff like that. And I would bring recordings into him and I'd say, you know, like, what do you think of this? And he'd tell me, you know, I said, oh, this is great. This is like, you know, and I'd bring something, a recording in, and I'd say, oh, I think this is awesome. I think this is fantastic. Listen to this. And he'd listen and he'd say, yeah, that is great. And then he'd say, and do better. Do better than that. You know.
So you mean the recording by like the random recording, like orchestra recording, whatever the recording, not the one that you made, but the the commercially available stuff.
Yep. And he'd say,
Okay.
yeah, that's really great. He said, you know, but he said, do better, and you can. Funny, because, you know, he would sit there and type on his typewriter, and, you know, and he'd do like two finger, you know, we call it hunt and peck, hunt for the letter, you know, so you know, he's sitting there on his typewriter doing this, and you're playing, you know, and, you know, and you think he's not paying attention to you, you know, and then you'd finish playing something, and then he'd swivel around in his chair, and he'd say, all right, this, you know, it doesn't sound like this, you know, and you think he's not listening, but he was, you know. You know, and again, you know, it was always musical things. I ended up figuring out a lot of how the tuba works on my own, so that I could take it in there and, you know, and he'd say, yeah, that sounds good, you know.
Okay.
So I remember, you know, listening to a recording of, this is really crystallized in my mind, but I remember listening to a recording of him on Heldenleben, playing Heldenleben.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And right at the end, after Strauss has declared himself the hero, you know, you know, there's this F flat, this E, you know, that keeps occurring, and, you know, I'm listening to this guy lay into this. You know, it's just got so much weight, you know, and I thought, wow. And the next one comes along and it's the same. And the next one comes along and it's the same. I think there are 5 of them, you know, and they're all the same. And I think, man, this is not an accident. You know, when you can do the same thing 5 times, you're in control of the instrument. You know, you're in command. And I think I was a sophomore at the time. And I'm sitting there listening to this, and I think, man, you know, that kind of command of the tuba, I want to have, and I don't, you know. For me, I just started making up etudes and exercises on my own, you know, to sort of begin.
So that really reminds me how you teach in a lesson. I mean, that's basically what I learned from you in Aspen, and that's really amazing that you came up with that idea at the sophomore in the college.
Yeah, I've been working on it ever since.
Wow.
So let's, you know, accuracy is most important things for playing the tuba.
You know, accuracy is you know, one thing I learned about accuracy is to take the mouthpiece and you know, here we're starting to get into what I got from Jacobs, because when you know, and I think Torchinsky finally called him up, said, listen, teach this kid, you know. So I had to listen, you know, and you know, that was life-changing too. It really was. It helped me begin to understand how to produce a sound in an efficient way. And he got me to make a sound when I was there that I'd never made before. You know, it was just more open, more resonant, you know, fuller bodied. And it was much less work to do it. And then, of course, I leave, and you know, and I can't remember how he got me to do it. You know, and I go home and I think, you know, I can't make the sound. You know, how is it? And the one thing that brought me back to it, and I'm, you know, I'm sure a lot of people have this same experience when they had a lesson with him. The one and the thing that brings them back to it may be different, but for me, I just remember hearing that guy buzz his mouthpiece. And he had this funnel thing, and he would buzz that mouthpiece into a funnel, and it went through a tube, and it had a meter on the, you know, on the thing, and it registered how much air, you know, and I'm sitting there buzzing this mouthpiece, you know, and you know, I'm jamming more and more air in this thing, and the needle is just sitting there laughing at me. You know, it's not moving at all. And I thought, well, that's why that needle goes bang. You know, when he goes into it, it's just. And when I got home, I remembered the quality of that buzz. And when I remembered the quality of that buzz and just tried to make that, then I felt a much bigger circle on my palm. I thought, oh, okay, now let me plug this into the tuba. And there was that sound he got me to make.
これはかなりその練習の先生のそのコンセプト的なところには触れたね、今ね。
So, Warren, so I think this is a pretty critical portion of your teaching. Can we still share this info with other people?
It just what?
I think this is kind of like critical thing of your like teaching style and your like teaching thing. We're not gonna put this on the YouTube. It'll be shared with the limited people who pays.
Okay.
But can we still share this info with other people who's watching this program?
You know, this information is out there. You know, people can find this information.
Yeah, but still, it's coming from the Warren Deck's mouth.
You know, it's only worth anything if it works for somebody.
Okay.
If it works for somebody, then it's worth something. If it doesn't, it's not worth anything.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. So should we move on to the another question, or should we? Okay.